right, well, we can go ahead and get started here. Again, welcome everybody to our TribalHub webinar, Internet Infrastructure Funding for Tribes and How a Private LTE Can Help Connect Tribal Communities with Baicells. Special thanks to you guys, Erik, Jessica, and Max for joining us today with this and giving this information to tribes across the country. The session will be recorded, so if you are on the call today and you want to share it with somebody else on your team, feel free to do that. Just share over the link. Tomorrow, you will receive an email from Zoom that has a copy of this webinar. But if you have any questions or you need another copy of it, whatever, you can always give us a call here at TribalHub and we'll get that out to you. A couple of learning objectives to take away from this webinar. One, to learn the latest information on funding opportunities, how to apply and other resources available to secure funding. And two, to understand what a private LTE network is and how tribes can use it for a wide range of cases. While we are on the call today, please make sure to use the chat or the Q&A feature to send in any of your questions, and we'll make sure to get to those either during the presentation or at the end. A couple of other webinars coming up on our calendar. If you're interested, hop over to TribalHub.com to register. And we do have our third annual Cybersecurity Summit coming up. It's a virtual event in March if you're interested in that. Again, TribalHub.com. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jessica, I believe, to start us off.
Awesome. Okay. Share my PowerPoint here. All right, hello everybody. My name is Jessica Engel, and I am here to talk about funding for tribes for internet infrastructure. And so I'm partnering here today with Erik, Randall, and this webinar is pretty exciting for me to share all of the information I've accumulated over the years on, this moment in history. Where there's a lot of opportunity for funding, a lot of opportunity for, bespoke, specific, and sovereign solutions for tribes. So about me, who am I and why does it matter? I've got a little over 20 years in IT leadership, mostly in government, tribal government, IT leadership, and then moving on into this broadband world. And, as a result of the pandemic and needing to get, tribal communities connected so that they can work remotely and access the things they need to access. But more than that, in the first round of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program grants through the NTIA, I wrote one of the largest funded infrastructure grants there. And as a result of that, I've learned a lot, and I very much enjoy sharing that information with folks, so they don't have to learn things the hard way, as I did. And basically, the thing that I'm hoping today is to be able to engage with the tribal communities, empower them with information, explore what some of the options are, explain the unknowns, and expand your options for getting a solution that works for you in place, and excite you about what's happening. So I'm including a link to my electronic business card so you can get my contact information, but I know that they're also going to potentially be putting that in the chat, and so you can get a hold of me if you want to ask any questions. I love to share resources. So all right, so opportunities. Show tribes and tribal organizations the money, right? There is an abundance of it right now, federally, but there's also foundational funding and philanthropy that's investing into supporting tribes and getting these solutions in place, because the federal funding doesn't cover all the needs. And then there's also state and local grant funding. A lot of times, especially like with BEAD is being filtered through the states. And so that's how a lot of the organizations will be accessing that BEAD funding is through their state. And so Those are the different kind of pots of money to consider. So what is in it for you? You know, you get to build a sovereign solution that works for your tribe. And the great thing about this sovereignty is being able to choose a solution that works for you, because there is no one cookie cutter solution for tribes. Every terrain is different, every population is different, every need is different. And so there is no easy way to make it, you know, a cookie cutter solution for every single person in every single area. The other thing that is a result that will come from building infrastructure and internet connectivity is the economic opportunities are endless. Creates jobs, increases tourism. It gives you more buying options. Buying power is important. Where I am in Northern California, it's a food desert. There is not a whole lot of options when it comes to food. And so being able to shop online and get those items delivered, getting options for, you know, various prices by going online is a huge benefit of getting access to the internet. Also increases education outcomes. I mean, we all know that the education outcomes have not been great. With increased connectivity, those can increase as well. And then telehealth options. I have so many great stories about how internet connectivity has been able to empower elders to live in their villages, even if they're super remote, and still be connected with their health providers. And then you get to develop a solution that has a generational impact. So it's not just like, you know, your immediate situation right now, but it's a solution for your children and your grandchildren. You know, thinking that 7th generational sort of solutions when you're planning to build out internet infrastructure. And then I also put a link here on the PowerPoint that will be available. Is it's to a Forbes article from 2019. It was a case that went to the Supreme Court and was won. And basically what it means is that the tribes have the power and the sovereignty to create their own economic enterprises to build these solutions for infrastructure and for construction and all of those things. And so that is another opportunity that comes along as like a secondary benefit of doing, you know, taking control over your internet outcome. So we all know, like, you know, every tribal government employee or volunteer wears tons of hats. They're busy. And especially now, like now more than ever, you know, there's just not enough time, not enough staff. You lose capacity that you've built by folks going to other jobs and things like that. So you end up with these laundry lists of excuses to not go after the funding opportunities that are available, or to just, you know, go ahead and let the incumbent provider, you know, do what they want to do. You know, some of the reasons, you know, too busy, no capacity, lack of experience, fear of the unknown. Another one that was really news to me was they were discouraged because prior applications for funding had been denied. But I want you all to like rest in knowing that there are a lot of people available to help. And, you know, friends are good medicine. It was a campaign for mental health and well-being back in the early 2000s, but it's true. Friends are good medicine. Build relationships with people and they are there for you when you need them. And it's not, you know, having those phone a friends to call when you don't know the answer is critical. So the phone a friends, right? There's grant making organizations. Internet Society has been super helpful. ARDC, that's the Amateur Radio Club. They have a fantastic grant program now. And what's so great about it is they have a technical board that's elected every term to support their projects. And so you don't just get, handed a check and left to figure it out on your own. There's people to help you with those projects. The Digital Equity Fund from the Michelson 20mm Foundation and Connect Humanity, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of grant-making organizations that are more than just a funding provider, that come and they partner with you throughout your entire project and beyond, and build those relationships with you and the relationships that they have with others. So, as the internet is essentially just a network of networks, if you put it in the most simple form. And by building the relationship, you're building your network of people resources and connecting those to other folks' people resources. And that's critical. So then there's other funding too, missionally driven or forced other funders. Like, I put a couple of funny ones, but like the Koch Foundation, Ford Family Foundation, Walmart Foundation, these foundations, they have grant funding. And if you're eligible, there's not a whole lot of effort needed to be able to access some funding. It's usually smaller. What I have here is like sort of like the easier to get the funding, the less funding it is. But each one of those pieces is a puzzle piece that's essential to achieving what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes you don't even know what you're ready to or what you're needing to put into place yet. And that's where these smaller funding opportunities come into play. So you can get feasibility studies, you can try things out, you can work with someone and it doesn't work out. Whereas like with federal funding, it's sort of a one and done thing. You can't reapply to replace a project that didn't work out. But with philanthropy and foundational funding, they're filling in the gaps there. An example is like with federal funding, sometimes you can't replace something that was damaged in a fire or a natural disaster. But philanthropy could help with that, and foundational funding can help with that, and sometimes even the state. Okay. Then, okay, so some resources. I have a few of them here that were really helpful to me personally. So TribalResourceCenter.net. Tribal Resource Center is it's a all-encompassing resource for tribes on just thinking about building a broadband plan all the way through. There's a help desk that you can access, that phone a friend and get some time with the experts. And that resource center sort of came out of this Tribal Broadband Boot Camp. So the Tribal Broadband Boot Camp was an effort of many and few really amazing folks from different organizations and different nonprofits. And the initial boot camps were funded by Internet Society, but now they've grown quite a bit. So there's other funders like Connect Humanity and so forth. So those resources are incredibly helpful. You can even, I suggest even sending administrators to these boot camps, because once you get your hands on some of these equipment and see, and touch it and feel it and experience it, it's a completely different story as far as like the priority and the importance of it. But also both of those Tribal Resource Center and the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps, what it does is it builds relationships within other tribes so that you have someone to call that's experiencing the same thing that you are. So for me, with my initial experience with TribalNet, annual conference, it's like that's the one place that tribes can go and, you know, work with vendors that have experience working with tribes. You don't have to spend so much time explaining to them the challenges that you're facing. And then the same thing with Baicells. You know, the Tribal Broadband Bootcamp, the initial one, you know, all the tribes that received a 2.5 gigahertz license in the tribal priority window of 2020 went home with a Baicells kit to be able to meet that FCC requirement. And I had not, prior to that boot camp, touched Baicells. And, you know, when you're not, you know, born into broadband, everything is new. And so the majority of us are all learning as we go. There's no wrong or silly questions to ask. And, you know, everybody's on the same page. We all have different experience and backgrounds, but we bring it to the table and we contribute to, you know, supporting each other. DigitalInclusion.org, that's the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, for digital navigators and for resources on how to introduce folks to internet connectivity, has been incredibly helpful because, you know, when you don't have access, when it's new, there's so many things to learn and to support. You know, small children can pick up a device and start using it right away, but with adults, it's not always the case, and especially with elders, it's critical. And then Benton Institute and several others I follow on LinkedIn, they do a lot of studies, which are critical to keep the funding coming and to support digital equity and to really amplify what the tribes are doing to solve their internet connectivity problems. So that's what I have to present on grant funding. Was there any questions?
Jessica, I didn't see any coming through the chat right now, but I mean, you'll be on the call. So everybody, just if you have other questions or maybe when Eric's speaking and you want to circle back to something, by all means, make sure you do that.
All right, so I will step aside and let Erik take over from here. But yeah, I'm here for any questions and I am available for follow-up later also.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. So perfect. A little bit about me. My name's Erik Randall. I've been in broadband, LTE, and different point-to-multipoint systems for the better half of 12 to 15 years, designing networks, testing networks, troubleshooting networks. I've done a little bit of everything when it comes to, you know, LTE and different broadband aspects. Uh-oh, I can't move my slide. Oh, be right back. All right, sorry about that. So building a smart city, you know, utilizing LTE, what can you do with it? What can anyone do with LTE? So there are so many different applications for it that we don't really even scratch the surface when we're going to be on this call. So, you know, there's casinos where you could put in indoor LTE network to track and monitor your employees going around the entire field, you know, the money being tracked. You could look at doing that. You can have home broadband across an outdoor LTE network. You can do video surveillance in parking lots. Water quality monitoring, you know, that's getting pretty important on the west of North America. And any kind of situation you have, you could actually look at building it for LTE. And just with an LTE network itself, you could expand from one to the other and layer on top of your original LTE networks. You know, so an example of that is if you start off by building a home broadband network, you're, you know, propagating LTE all over your entire area. Once you get done doing that, the network's built, then you start thinking about other use cases for it. All right, now that I have this network built, maybe the first responders could use it so they could always have connectivity through a private network as well. So even if you just have that single use case, home broadband, you can continuously add on to a private LTE network. It is your private network with your security on it. So with that being said, what is private LTE? So private LTE is exactly that, is a private LTE network that is just your network itself. If you think of LTE, you normally think of AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. They're more of your public LTE networks where you pay them, you get on their network, and then from there you could utilize their network wherever you go that they are available. For a private LTE network, we have different spectrums available to us. The tribal communities, they have access to 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. Almost all the tribal communities have some kind of access to it. So that's something that we could definitely look into. For anybody else in North America, what made private LTE, popular is the CBRS band 48 spectrum. This spectrum has allowed anyone to actually have access to about 150 megahertz of spectrum that is dedicated to whatever they want it to be. We'll get into more details about CBRS here in just a few slides. So for private LTE, though, it is just your LTE network that you build. You're utilizing all of the funds, all of the research, all of the development that AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile puts into it, and you're utilizing all of that knowledge and technology into your own private network. So part of that whole LTE is the EPC, the Evolved Packet Core. That Evolved Packet Core tells each user, hey, you go to this customer, I'm sorry, to this manufacturer, to this LTE network. So, like my phone here, the Google Pixel 6, this actually will go to something like Mint Mobile. My other phone that I use will go to a Verizon network. Then here at my house, when I'm connecting different devices to my private LTE network, it'll connect to my Baicells network. So all of that's done through the SIM card within the Evolved Packet Core itself. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. In some instances, it can be really simple. The fear of the unknown that Jessica was talking about. Baicells makes part of it simple. Getting started with LTE is actually really simple with Baicells. So just a quick comparison of LTE to Wi-Fi in some aspects. So the wireless spectrum with LTE, in 2.5, you have access to 200 megahertz. In CBRS, the band 48, you have access to 150. It is either fully licensed, like in 2.5, or it's lightly licensed in CBRS. Wi-Fi is just wide open. Anyone can do it at any time. So you could run the risk of a lot of interference utilizing Wi-Fi versus LTE. The signal coverage, LTE is about 4 times greater indoors than Wi-Fi. Outdoors, yeah, LTE, there's no comparison. You're talking about anywhere from 7 to 35 miles of coverage with LTE. Connectivity, LTE is known for low latency, quick handoffs, and security. The security is, untouched, unrivaled compared to Wi-Fi. The ecosystem, LTE, 5G, it's a catchphrase. Everybody knows those 2 little words, and they love to talk about it and spout it. So with the device ecosystem, LTE, it's ever evolving. Every day new devices are popping up on different LTE systems. With Wi-Fi, it's kind of mature. It's one of those, it's there. I'm creating a new device. Let me just go ahead and put Wi-Fi on it. And then the upgradability, both of them actually have a full path to the next level. Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7. We're sitting at 4G LTE, starting to do 5G LTE, but there's already talks of 6G and 7G. So there will always be paths to better and better for both Wi-Fi and LTE. So let's talk about both the spectrums real quick. Band 41, it is the broadband radio spectrum. It is, EBS education broadband spectrum. It's the frequencies between 2496 and 2690 megahertz. It is a completely licensed spectrum. And within that spectrum, you have different blocks to mess with. So there are channels that you take those channels and you put them together. So each little bit of spectrum that you get will be 5 or 6 megahertz channels. You take those channels and you put them together, aggregate them together to get one big channel. And with that big channel is where you can start getting a lot more throughput with it. So within this band 41, you have no power limit. So your radios can blast as much as you need it to blast, as much as the radio will allow it to blast. Your license are normally for 35-mile radius, or in the case of the tribal communities, they'll have entire areas dedicated just to them. This is predominantly used for tribal nations, tribal communities, or education, like different colleges. So T-Mobile bought Sprint. Sprint owned most of the BRS and EBS spectrum. So now T-Mobile owns, 75% of the BRS, 65% of the EBS spectrum. All right. So band 48, CBRS, this is the Citizens Broadband Radio Spectrum. This is a lightly licensed band. It's 150 megahertz. And with it, you have a tiered system where the 3 tiers, you have the top access people that have access to it whenever they want with certain amount of spectrum. So that top access has about 50 megahertz that could be dedicated to them whenever they need it. Next, you have the PALS, Priority Access License. Back in 2019, there was a license that brought in billions of dollars that has, auctioned off 10 megahertz blocks throughout the entire CBRS in North America. So again, that brought in billions of dollars. And then whatever's left after both the PALS and the top dogs get, it's lightly licensed. It is for anybody. It's general authorized access. So within that is where everyone could really start playing with LTE, learning LTE, developing their own knowledge base for LTE. So how does the CBRS spectrum work? There's a database called the Spectrum Access System, or the SAS, where all of the data is collected from all of the devices. So the location, the azimuth, the tilts, all of that's actually stored inside this database, and it knows and understands where everybody's at, and it tries not to interfere with each other. So an example of this is, with a top dog, let's say the Navy destroyer comes into, a port, Newport News, Virginia. So when that naval destroyer is coming in, it actually communicates on one of these spectrum. So it's going to come in and tell the SAS, hey, I need my spectrum back. The SAS is then going to go to all the devices that's sitting on his spectrum and say, all right, it's time for you to move off for a little bit. And it's going to push those devices onto a different portion of this lightly licensed spectrum. It's sharing. So now when the destroyer goes back out, the SAS says everybody can go back to normal and return to the way you're doing everything. So there are 4 SAS vendors. It's Google, Federated, Sony, and Amdocs. And they all work together to maintain this database. To enter information in the SAS, you do need a CPI, which is a certified professional installer. And it's a $600 class you take online with one of the SAS vendors, and then you're up and running. It's that easy to get an LTE network started nowadays. So because of, band 41, because of the CBRS band, we see a lot more people, dabbling in private LTE, whereas you didn't before. You always had just your Verizon, your T-Mobile, those larger companies with those millions of dollars that they could spend on this, just doing the LTE network. But because of these 2 spectrums, private LTE is now emerging, whether it's indoors or outdoors. So a basic LTE architecture overview from right to left. So from right, we have the terminals, the end user devices, the smart devices. This is what's going to be sitting, at your house or going through a warehouse. So again, the Pixel being an example, this is a terminal. This is an end user device that will connect back to a radio access network, one of the eNode Bs. So again, terminal is the first portion of it. From there, the terminal is going to go back to an eNode B. An eNode B is a fancy way of saying base station. It is a 4G base station. And that base station is what's producing that LTE signal out there for those terminals to talk with. From the eNode Bs, whether they're indoor or outdoor, it goes back into the entire transmission network. You know, with you can have, when it goes into the transmission network, it's going to hit an evolved packet core and a network manager. So that's the EPC that we're talking about. So that's, you know, all the way to the left there, that's the cloud core. That's Baicells' version of the EPC, and it lies in the actual cloud. So that is a basic LTE architecture from right to left. You have the terminals, you have the radio access network, and then you have the core itself. A couple of quick blurbs about Baicells. You know, why are we doing this LTE? What is it that we bring to the table? So we offer a 4G, 5G scalable solution. You know, our roadmap for 2023 is pretty much littered with 5G technology. Our 4G has been tested and proven. We've been around for in North America now for 7 years, and we're ever growing. We provide the entire end-to-end solution, whether it's going to be the core itself or whether it's going to be one of the terminals. We have everything from the core all the way to the terminals and everything in between. But because it's a standard of technology, you could actually pick and choose what you want to do. So if you want one of our end user devices, our terminals, you could take that and you could stack it on someone else's LTE's RAN. Or you could take, you know, our RAN and have someone else's terminal, like having a Baicells eNode B connected to a Google Pixel or an iPhone. You could actually do that. What makes Baicells most popular though, why do people like us? We are easy to use. We have a simplified operations and ease of use, and this helps make it a rapid deployment. You know, Jessica was talking about how everybody was handed a Baicells kit. The reason why is because it is so easy. You get into it, you start playing with it, and then lo and behold, you have an LTE network running at your house. That is, you know, one of the best things about Baicells is that ease of use. We have our ever ongoing support where if you buy our product, as firmware continues to develop, we give you that firmware for free. So we're not going to try and nickel and dime you to death with that. And you'll see that here in a second as well. We serve everybody. You know, we have 10 tier 1 carriers throughout the world. We're a global company. We have enterprises. We sort different communities use our stuff. Every use case out there, we've touched it. We've been there. And our mission, it truly is to connect the unconnected. And we do that with innovative and economical wireless solutions. All right, so the benefits of Baicells, complete turnkey solution. We have the core, the radio, the end user devices. It's easy to deploy LTE technology. We're going to take full advantage of all of that knowledge that Verizon and AT&T has dumped into this technology, and we put that into our eNode Bs. With our ease of use deployment, we have a cloud core approach to where you don't have to buy different servers locally. You could utilize a cloud approach and get up and running quickly. This is going to significantly reduce your CapEx and allow for quicker deployments because you don't have to set up those different servers. We, as mentioned, we are part of the worldwide standardized 3GPP technology, and we can use with anyone else. Part of nickeling and diming, this is what you get out of the box with one of our eNode Bs. So this is the 436Q. Inside the box, you get the actual eNode B, you get a power supply, you get the GPS assembly, you get the SFPs, and you get heat shrink. All of this is, or cold wrap, all of this is included in what's in the box. We've learned and understood from all of our future past employments that when someone goes out to deploy this, sometimes they forget one little thing. And if they forget one little thing, it could actually halt the deployment process significantly, 2 or 3 days waiting for that next part to come in. So we looked at that and we're like, we're just going to put everything in the box so everyone will have access to it pretty quickly. Our product portfolio. So we have a plethora of outdoor base stations that goes to both band 41 and band 48. They're high powered, they're low powered, everything you need to be in between. They have integrated antennas or external antennas. We have many different options, and as always, they're all 3GPP standard. We have indoor selection as well, band 48 indoor solution. It's like a Wi-Fi access point, but it's an LTE based. So that way you get greater coverage. An example of that indoor base station, that indoor B, we had an integrator do a warehouse. They were estimating a warehouse, and they needed 27 Wi-Fi access points to cover this warehouse. When they came to us and said, hey, can we look at possibly doing Baicells for indoor LTE? We did that. They were able to reduce the amount of Wi-Fi access points from 27 to 6 LTE node Bs. This actually brought the cost down by about $100,000 because you didn't have to buy all those Wi-Fi access points. You didn't have to run all of the Ethernet cable for all of those Wi-Fi access points. Just overall, it significantly reduced the cost. We have PoE routers. So, regular home routers, but PoE out to feed some of those end user devices. We have MiFis, which are pocket routers, great for events, for POS systems. We have a local evolved packet core, the EPC, or we have a cloud-based EPC. Whatever way you want to go, we have everything you need to get you up and running. All right, so in our path to the next generation, 5G is the latest term, or it's starting to fade away, but 5G is a big term. Where is 5G going to take us next? So with 5G, whether it's band 41, whether it's band 48, we're looking at within fixed wireless, lowering the latency of end-to-end solutions. We're looking at providing higher throughput, more connected users. All of that's done with 5G technology. And again, this isn't technology that we create. We're just reusing all of that research that other companies have put together. All right. And thank you, everybody. Ooh, that's a bad slide. Thank you, everybody. That's the end of my portion here. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Hey, Erik, there were a couple of questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see those. Okay. One from Jerry. It says, our tribe acquired a small internet service provider that use Baicells equipment and technologies, wanting to use their LTE technology and equipment to expand wireless internet service to the remainder of the reservation. However, upon researching, the company found it to be a Chinese-owned, and the equipment could not be acquired under the BABA rules relating to the use of ARPA funds. And he's asking if if this equipment is now has received an exemption for purchasing or not.
I don't know the BABA rules, but I do know that we have been deployed in different ARPA fundings, whether it's going to be the BEAD funding, the ARPA funding, or even RDOF funding. Baicells has been deployed throughout it. We're aware of our Chinese roots. And we know that that is a big issue for a lot of deployments, especially with federal government funding. The ways that we've been working around that is our cloud core solution is actually based just in North America. It's on the Microsoft Azure going east and west. If that's still a problem, you can do everything locally, have a local core and a local network manager. When it comes to where everything's being built, our infrastructure is actually now being built in Taiwan. So that way, we're starting to move away from that Chinese culture that everybody in North America is actually worried about. Okay.
Another question from Ophelia says, we've been running this product, Baicells CPE, on our self-deployed network since 2018. They have been the only reliable equipment I have seen move to, I'm sure this is some kind of acronym, Inseego. And now I go back to Baicells because of their reliability with outdoor units. We're about to transfer over to Cloud Core from Freedom Fi with the monthly subscription to Cloud Core. Will there also be technical assistance for all of my needs on Cloud Core?
So on Cloud Core, it is actually really simple. There will be tech support. We do have tech support that we offer where you just, toss in an email. And our tech support last year on average took about 12 minutes to not only respond, but also solve problems. So as long as you have our equipment, we do support our equipment. But with our free support, it is best effort, via email. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that answers everybody's question there.
And then the last one I have right now is asking about if there is a resource to find all of the tribal sourced funding that is available right now, or do they have to go through each individual, website to look at all those different sources? I think they're looking for, is there like one spot where you can find all those resources?
I think when we send out this one, yep, there you go, Jessica.
Yeah, so the tribalresourcecenter.net, they try to keep all of the current funding opportunities available there. But things are popping up left and right. So what I recommend is keeping up with your state broadband office for those state-based nonprofits. But yeah, there's an abundance of funders out there. So there's not one solution to rule them all yet. Mm-hmm. But I try to keep up on that sort of information and share it out on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I am at Jingle All the Way, but with an E instead of an I.
Awesome. I love that. All right, so that was the last question that I had coming in. If anybody else has a question, now is the time to put that in either in the chat or in the Q&A. And again, I will be sending this out via Zoom to anybody who registered tomorrow. So you can rewatch it or share it with any of your team who could make it today, which is a great thing for them to, to take a look at it and see all those resources as well. I also did put in the chat some of the resources and references that Jessica had in her presentation. So if you need those, again, you can always email any of us here at TribalHub, and we will definitely get you in touch with Jessica or Erik or any of their team there. So Erik, Jessica, anything to wrap up before we end the call here?
I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Good, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. And one of the great things that Erik kind of breezed through, but is kind of significant, just knowing from experience, there's a lot of equipment manufacturers for connectivity solutions that are not integratable with other pieces and components for expansion. And so the piece that Erik had mentioned about being able to drop in Baicells pieces into your network solution wherever it's needed is a very helpful and unique thing. Nowadays, a lot of folks are moving to this, like, you can only use this one brand for everything throughout. And if you wanted to change or try something else out, you would have to basically take down your whole network and build a new one, or build a parallel network with a different equipment manufacturer. So that is incredibly helpful, especially when you're creating solutions for right now, knowing that you're going to be building long-term sustainable solutions that could change, like terrain changes and the needs change, especially with climate change. I'm looking at 250-foot redwood trees and on the California coast. So next year I could completely be in the water. You never know. So those are some really key components. Also, one of the collaborators with the Tribal Resource Center and the boot camps, Althea, their platform, they use Baicells equipment to load their platform onto. And so it takes the place of the firmware essentially. So there's a lot of usable affordable solutions with Baicells. And I think that's why it's sort of the go-to, aside from the ease of use and learning, because LTE is two things: very expensive, boy, and you know, challenging sometimes. So that's what I wanted to add.
That's great. Very informative. I learned a lot. So I appreciate Erik and Jessica taking the time to share your insights. It's a big topic, and there's a lot of people looking into this, you know, right now with all the funding sources available. So very timely. So thank you for your webinar.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.